Hello and welcome to this video. So in a previous video on network address translation, I discussed network address and port translation and also introduced EZIP. We also talked about in other videos dynamic NAT, static NAT, and the general overview of network address translation. Now I need to give a quick view on these before starting to talk about NAT server. In static NAT, we saw that the internal network can communicate to the external network, and the external network can communicate to the internal network proactively. I mean, the external network can start the jazz, or the internal network can start the jazz. And we saw that this is not possible with NAT, with dynamic NAT. Since we have an address pool that is dynamically generated, an address pool from which we dynamically generate a NAT mapping table. The NAT mapping table is dynamic, and so the external device does not know which IP address has been mapped to what he wants to speak to. In network address and port translation, and also in EZIP, it's not bidirectional, it's only internal to external. So in NAT server, we are looking for a way for the external users to access the internal network. Why would we need something like that? Maybe we have some servers on our internal network. We have some server on our internal network, a web server, for example. We have a web server on our internal network, and it's connected to a NAT device. And we don't want the web server, of course, to be accessing the web clients. We want the web clients from the internet to be able to access our web server. You realize this is kind of the opposite of what we have been doing. For network address and port translation, we want a way for our internal network users to access the outside world. For dynamic NAT, it is a way for our internal network users to access the internet. For static NAT, it is both ways. Our internal network users access the internet, and internet users can access our internal users because it is one-on-one mapping. Now, for NAT server, it is really external users, internet users, that are accessing our intranet or our internal network. So let us see how this is implemented. As I've mentioned, NAT server maps an internal server to a public network through a one-to-one mapping between a public IP address to port number and a private IP address to port number. This function is used when internal servers need to provide services for the public network. So you can see it is a one-to-one mapping, and so we can have this guy accessing that guy and the other side accessing this side. But there are really not many cases where a web server wants to proactively access its clients. So it's really the outside world accessing our internal network. An external host in this case proactively accesses the public IP address to port number of the server so that it communicates with the internal server. Something like this. On our private network, we have a web server with a private IP address, but internet users like you and me need to send requests to this web server and to receive replies. So what we are going to do, this is actually close to what we call port redirection. What we are going to do is mapping this IP address one-on-one in the mapping table to the public address we have available. In this case, it is that address and the port number. This is, in other words, saying if anyone from the outside tries to access this address on that port number, please redirect their traffic to this internal address on that port number. Let us look at an example here. So in this example, 200.1.2.3, a PC over the internet, is attempting to access 122.1.2.1 at port 80. Of course, they are using a random port generated by their own operating system, sends a packet right here. Now, our NAT mapping table has the entry that maps any traffic directed towards that socket to that socket on our internal network. And so the router will change this destination IP address, in this case, to that You also note that it is the destination IP we are sending for the coming traffic or the fast traffic, and the reply will also be mapped against our mapping table. When the reply is sent by the web server, it's coming from a private source IP address and its port number for the web server 80. When it hits the NAT device will check the mapping table again and translate that source IP to the one specified in the NAT mapping table, and the destination will remain the same. So for coming traffic, it's the destination IP converted. For going traffic, it is the source IP translated. It's kind of the reverse of the NAT we have been talking about. Right here, I have an example configuration of NAT server, and you can see that we just need to get to an interface. After giving it an IP address, we say NAT server protocol TCP global that, and for web traffic, the inside address is that, and the port number is that. Now, this is another way of saying it is port 80. Don't mind that, but this is the command we would use, and this command would implement bidirectional NAT. Well, of course, this guy would be able to communicate outside, but he really doesn't know the internet users out there, so we are not looking at that possibility. We are looking at internet users proactively accessing this guy, and then the conversion will be based on that mapping. So, 4 implementations of NAT. First being static NAT, which is a one-on-one mapping. The second being dynamic NAT. Which is still one-on-one, kind of, but it's dynamic because we have a pool. This is based on a pool. So different users can access at different times, but the maximum number still remains the same. You have to get the total public IP addresses that equal to the number of internet users who want to access the internet concurrently. It's kind of wasteful. And so we come up with network address and port translation, NAPT. This is also called port address translation, or PAT. And then I've talked about a special implementation of that we call EasyIP. EasyIP is where we don't use the address pool, we use the interface address of our NAT device as the NAT address. It's the public address. And then we convert all the internal addresses to that same public address, but different port numbers. Finally, NAT server. Of this 4, we have noted that this and this are the ones that enable internet users to proactively access us. The others only enable us to access the internet. I hope this has been informative for you, and thank you for viewing.